Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Psalm 106 really shows the compassion, the grace, the love of God, and it led the psalmist to praise the Lord. And one of the ways that it shows just how wonderful the Lord really was towards Israel is by holding up both the sins of Israel and the great acts of God. In this psalm, we see 12 sins of Israel and also 12 acts of God. 12 acts of God that was for their benefit and in a way that he favored them. The 12 sins were, 1, they forgot him, verses 7, 13, and 21. Secondly, they rebelled against him, verse 7 and verse 43. They didn't wait on the Lord, verse 13. They craved after other things in verse 14. They envied in verse 16. They exchanged the glory of God for idols, verse 20. They didn't believe God, verse 24. They grumbled against God, verse 25. They did not listen to God, verse 25. They provoked God through the idols that they worshiped in verse 29. They did not purify the land, verse 34. And they mingled with the nations around them, verse 35. So they forgot the Lord. They rebelled against the Lord. They didn't wait on the Lord. They craved. They envied. They exchanged the glory of God. They didn't believe God. They grumbled against God. They didn't listen to God. They provoked God. They did not purify the land, and they mingled with the nations. That's a lot of sins listed in just one psalm. And this would seem like a hopeless case, as this would seem like a nation in which God would just dispose of, disregard, and forget about and move on. But in the midst of all of these sins that Israel committed, there was these wonderful acts of God. For one, he saved them, verses 8 and 10. He worked wonders for them, verses 8 through 12. He redeemed them, verse 10. He gave them their requests in verse 15. He disciplined them, verses 17 and 18. He turned away his wrath from them, verse 23. He promised judgment, verses 26 through 27, as way of warning. He gave them to the nations, verse 41. He delivered them, verse 43. He heard their cry, verse 44. He remembered the covenant he had made with them in verse 45 and showed compassion in verse 46. So he dealt with them in a very compassionate way, a very loving way. Yes, he did deal with them harshly at times to correct them and to bring them back in a relationship with him, but that was even followed up with compassion and love and grace. And so in the 12 sins of Israel, you have both the 12, you have coupled with that these 12 acts of God that was for their good and for their benefit, which really brings to light just how wonderful God was on his part in their relationship. They had failed him over and over again. They had failed him, but he time and time again showed his faithfulness and his dedication and his commitment to the covenant that he had made with them, and he stuck to it. And this caused the psalmist to just praise the Lord. And as we reflect on this, we can probably think of at least 12 sins that we have committed in our lives, maybe even more. As we look back on our lives and we think about the times in which maybe we did things similar to them, where we didn't listen to God, maybe we didn't believe God, maybe we exchanged God for other things, maybe we mingled with the world. You could just go on. It might be that we've committed these same 12 sins or maybe even more. But also, as we look back on our lives, we could also recognize the fact that God has been faithful to us as well. That even though we have gone astray so many times, as Isaiah 53 says, we all like sheep have gone astray. Even though we've gone astray so many times and have lived a life and done things contrary to the will of God, still time and time again, he shows his faithfulness. He still shows himself as working for our benefit on our behalf, whether it's blessing us and giving us pleasant things or correcting us and bringing us through the harsh and difficult experience of being disciplined by him for the sake of correcting us and bringing us back into a relationship with him. No matter how it was that he was working in our lives, it was always so that he could establish a good, solid relationship with us and to display his love, grace, and compassion towards us. And so we too can take this psalm and personalize it for ourselves. Even though we may not be a part of Israel, we may not have participated in this history with Israel, we all have a history with God that is very similar to Israel, in that we have rebelled against him. We have done we've gone our own way, but the Lord has shown us his love, his grace, and compassion. So as the psalmist, we should conclude with praise. As we reflect on this, we too can join the psalmist in just praising the Lord, thanking the Lord, having a grateful heart before God for the wonderful ways that he is working in our lives, and to continue to draw closer and closer to him, to be all the more inspired to chase after this relationship with God that is so wonderful and so great. So let's be inspired by Psalm 106. Let's be inspired by God's mercy, grace, compassion, and let us draw even closer to the Lord as we read this psalm. So these are some things we can reflect on as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.